Welcome to Selfish Confidence, a place where we can connect and be real about how hard it is to be your damn self. My name is Jess, and my goal is to help you build confidence and belief in yourself to live any life path you want, even if it's unconventional. It's time to flip off societal pressures and connect with women who've also felt on the outside by their life choices. We're here to encourage you to grab the mic and speak your truth. I know it can be scary, but we're in this together. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Selfish Confidence Podcast. It's Jess here, and today is a fun day. I know I say that every time, but what's really special about this guest that I have today, it's someone that I have watched grow and have been a part of their life for like a while now. Like, this isn't just someone who's like, hey, I met you on IG, like, come on over. Like, I actually have seen some really beautiful transformation. So I have Alexis Doss here. What's up, girl?
Hi. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here. You're so precious. And you look cute, by the way. I love your jacket.
Thanks. I went out for a coffee date this morning, so I had to like put clothes on.
I look
So
like a normal human.
look like a normal human. So that's why I'm still looking like a normal human for you
Well,
today.
you look cute. I love it.
Thanks. Can you tell everyone who's listening just a little bit about you? Like, what's your background and how you got started as the tough love coach?
Yeah. So, oh my gosh, there's so many different angles I could really start with, but to kind of make a long story short, and I was talking to somebody about this the other day and they like didn't believe me, but I went to school to be a high school history teacher. And so I thought I was going to do that. And then 4 months before I graduated, I was like, oh my God, this is not at all what I want to do. Like, I don't know if I can handle these kids all the time. And so I had like this quarter life crisis. I started dating this guy like across the United States, and like he came and met like my family and my friends, and all my family and friends were like, this guy's not it. And I was like, yes, he is. But that was like a whole separate thing. And so he kind of, it ended up being an abusive relationship, but I moved with him from the East Coast to the West Coast, moved to LA. We were going to be actors and actresses. It was going to be this whole great thing. And all the things that he said existed didn't, like the house we were going to move in, all of that stuff. And so I ended up being homeless, sleeping out of my car. I was struggling with eating disorders. I got diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome in 2013. And all of that was kind of the catalyst that honestly got me to where I am now, because I never really like cared for myself. You know, I wouldn't say I hated myself, but I definitely struggled a lot with like self-love and then a lot of different things like that. And so when that happened with my health, with getting that like diagnosis, that's when I first started to like take care of myself. And I started with food, and I started posting on Instagram back when everybody was posting like pictures of their food all the time, and that's like all Instagram was, and with like weird filters that made it look like not food. And so I was sharing that, and then I started to get more into like fitness. And then I got my certification in, I think it was like 2013, 2014, from IIN, which is the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, because I started to feel good. And I was like, I want to help other people feel like how I feel. And so I did that. And then I got into Beachbody network marketing and like kind of did a bunch of different things throughout that whole time period. But from then until now, and when I started, I had no business background, like no clue what I was doing. And I just knew I wanted to help other people because I felt good. And so as I started to like evolve, I just started asking different questions and realizing that I didn't want to just like tell people, hey, do this workout, hey, eat this way. I really wanted to figure out, well, why is it hard for you to do it in the first place? Why is there so much resistance? Why are you binge eating? And so when I kind of got into that why, it led me more into like life coaching. So I was always doing network marketing, but the life coaching was still going on in the background as well. So I was doing like a little bit of both the whole time. And then once I got really good at building my businesses, I was like, oh, I could help entrepreneurs do this. So then I got more into like business coaching, and I still consider myself a life coach that helps with business, not a business coach that helps with life, because I do both. But I definitely always am going to lean heavier on like habits, routines, mindset, structure, things like that. And so that's kind of like led me to this point. I think the tough love coach, definitely self-proclaimed, but I think that piece really came from playing volleyball my whole life. I always was more drawn to like the kind of in your face, tough love type of coaches, like a lot of my male coaches. I had a few female coaches that were like that too, but I just always gravitated towards that. And that's like and I say this with my podcast is I want to redefine what tough love means. I don't, tough love doesn't have to be like yelling at people and telling them everything they have to do. It's just like successful people have honest conversations with themselves. And so it's helping people have those honest conversations with themselves and holding them accountable to take action on all the things they know they need to do, but they're just not doing, essentially. So,
100%. So many people
yeah.
listening right now, they're like, yeah, I know. Okay. I know, Alexis, all the things I'm supposed to be doing. But it's so beautiful to see where you came from and like knowing your background and knowing your story, where, coming from an abusive relationship, being homeless, to having a successful business and being where you are now. And someone who's put so much time and energy and effort into themselves. It's just like so beautiful to see this light come through. I'm even going to get emotional to think about it just because it's a lot of time and effort. Like
Yeah.
people, I think they only see the finished product and they don't see the years of dedication to self-development that got you here. Like,
Yeah. And like even you saying that, like obviously I know that and it's like a big piece of my story, but it is crazy to think, especially just talking to you, knowing like you do know me for you have known me for so long. It is crazy to think like it's been a while. Like I started my journey. I mean, I was always doing little things, but like I really started around that time when I got diagnosed, which was February of 2013. So that's been more than 11 years that happened, and there's been so many things that has happened since then, and it's a lot of work, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of failures, a lot of mistakes, a lot of successes, a lot of things, but it's a lot. Like that's a over a decade of
yeah.
things.
Yes. So people listening who are watching and seeing the finished product, remember like 12 years, 11 years behind. Like it's been a lot of effort, a lot of growth, a lot of energy, and a lot of like unconventional life paths that you've been on. Like you've kind of gone on this beautiful roller coaster, and maybe sometimes it doesn't look beautiful. A little bit of one of those like wooden roller coasters, the ones that like shake you silly and like make you want to
Yeah.
vomit. Like it can feel like that. So like how did you get over this fear and judgment of others to step into this, to follow your heart, to live this life you've truly always wanted? And even like maybe if it doesn't look how you thought it would, like how did you get to where you are with like, some people who are like rolling their eyes and saying
Yeah.
like, don't get on that roller coaster, you're gonna die up there.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, and this is like what I started recently, is a new TikTok and a new YouTube channel, and they're both called the Failure Diaries. And essentially on the TikTok, I'm sharing like one failure every day for a year, and then I'm going to continue doing it. But that's like what I'm going to do for the first year. So we're about to, today's day 50 actually, which is crazy. And then my YouTube channel similar, but it's kind of like story times and like things I'm doing currently or things I'm trying for the first time, just to kind of desensitize people from failure. And so the reason I bring that up is because I think one benefit, like as a coach, typically what you help other people with is going to be the things that you struggled with. You struggle with it, you figure your shit out in some way, and it's never perfect, right? But we're like a
Hmm.
few steps ahead of the people that we're helping. And then, we help them do that. But one thing that I feel like, not that I wouldn't say I never struggled with, but I was lucky that growing up, my mom very much instilled in me the idea of like, it's okay to fail, like, fail forward, like you're not gonna be the best. And so I don't feel like I was ever super afraid of failure. Like of course, nobody wants to fail necessarily, no one wants to have other people see you fail and then judge you, but I feel like I did have a good kind of just upbringing in the sense of like it's okay to make mistakes. And so I feel like that definitely helped me in this process. But with that, a lot of it was also a lot of failures. Like one of my favorite quotes is the master has failed more times than the student has ever even tried. And I say this is like a tough love piece, is so many people who aren't successful, and I don't say that in a mean way, but they're like not where they want to be just yet. They're What they're doing is trying so hard to avoid failure that they don't even take any action. But the successful people, the people that they probably look up to, entrepreneurs, whoever, actresses, like athletes, they've all failed so many times, and that's the reason why they are where they are. So the only reason I think I'm where I am is because I have just failed forward, and I've been okay with that. And I haven't always wanted to. It's definitely sucked. I cry a lot. I'm a very sensitive and emotional person. And so I think it's just failing and being okay with it, and working on, if you feel like you can't do that, working on why you can. And definitely having support and accountability with that process, whether that is a mentor or friends or like a group, a mastermind. Like, it doesn't have to be something that you pay for necessarily, but like, it's so important to not do things on your own. I work with a lot of people with ADHD, and ADHD people love to like be a loner and like only like do things like, I got to figure it out on my own, or if it's not good enough. And so like, I feel like I've always, even though I can tend to be a loner from the very beginning, and that's why I think like with network marketing I did well with, was because I liked the community aspect and I liked connecting people and I liked all of that. And I think that's so important when you're going to fail forward, because if you can fail forward but you know other people are doing it too, they're supporting you through the process, it just makes it like so much easier to fail, you know?
100%. Like, I think, especially with our background in networking, marketing, it was less scary because we were doing it together, right? And you're just like, hey, I'm gonna do this, so like, you might as well try it too. And you're like, okay, guess so. But like, you felt less silly about it too, I think is the big thing. And like, that fear of failure is huge. I think that's the number one reason why most people don't start. And especially something like a podcast or a YouTube channel or TikTok, like, it's this fear that is behind it. And I love that your mother instilled in you from a young age, like, hey, you're gonna fail. So like, let's just do it anyway. Fail forward, keep moving. And I 100% believe that's gotten you to where you are today. Cause you're right. Yeah. Failure has been a really cool thing to see. Is there one thing in particular that you can think of right now that you're like, I freaking failed at that, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me?
Like everything I've ever done, I don't think there's anything that I have like started, even if I have success with it now, nothing I've ever done has just been like smooth sailing the whole time. Like, I was thinking about this too. And you could look at it as like a super Debbie Downer, but like, I just recently got a divorce. I asked for it in January, and like we went through the whole process. It was finalized in November, but to me it feels like it was January. So it feels like it's been over a year, even though the divorce wasn't finalized till November of
January of
last.
last year, by the way.
Yeah, January of last year. And then it was finalized in November of last year. So it feels like a while, but if you think about it, every relationship I've been in has failed. I'm like very much a relationship person, but all my relationships have failed. Still haven't had a successful one. I mean, the successful one's the one that lasts forever. So I guess everybody at the end of the day is always going to fail at their relationships. But like everything I've done in business, like when I first started network marketing, the first year I didn't have any business background. And so I failed at realizing I had to save money for taxes, and then was like
Mm.
paying taxes
Oh
like
yeah.
after for a while. And then I did network marketing and was really successful with it, and then decided to leave. And that was really difficult, like for so many reasons. It was so much a part of my identity. I was terrified of like the people in the organization, like just fucking hating me and not understanding it. And like, it was never about them. And at the end of the day, like, you always have to do what's best for you. But that doesn't mean that like people can't have their own perceptions of that. But like, I had to make that choice. And so like and like even in my business now, like there's been some like years, and I've been doing what I've been doing now the whole time. This is just more at the forefront. But like, there's been years where I'm making bank, and then other years where like you see everybody else, and I'll always be vulnerable and talk about things. You always see everybody else with like, every year I make more money and I make more money, I make more money. I haven't had that. Most of the time I am moving in that direction, but there's been years where like one year I made more and one year I made less. And everybody's always like, oh, my income is always at a
Mhm.
trajectory. And of course, that's like the goal, but that's not everybody's outcome. And that's okay. And that's normal. Like, even if you look at product-based businesses that you probably buy from, they have years where like they're lower than others. So it's like I don't think there's anything in particular that I could say was like, oh, I failed at that. I would say everything as a whole, everything I've ever tried, and I consider myself a pretty successful person, everything from my health to my relationships to my business to how I treat myself, how I treat my friends, like being a good friend, being a good partner. I've failed at all of it, and I have succeeded at all of it. But the only reason I am succeeding in the areas that I am is because I failed. And I teach this to my clients, is failure. If you can really teach yourself that failure is just data and that's all it is, it's like you can almost get excited when you fail, because it's like, oh, okay, now I know what doesn't work. That leaves me less things to figure out what does work, right? Because now I know, okay, these things don't work. Now I can shift this. So I just like you can feel sad about when something doesn't work out, but then it's just like I feel like I'm so good at things now because I failed a lot. Like a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Right. And I think, again, it's that fear piece. When you even say too, like, oh, I failed at every relationship that I've had. And I'm like, you know what? But like, your like recent relationship, you were in it for a really long time. Like, is that really a failure? Like, there
Yeah.
are good things that came from it. And like the optimistic standpoint, like I'm on the outside being like, but like, really, was it a failure? Like, society might say so, like, might say divorce equals failure, but like,
Yeah.
there are really beautiful things that you learned in that too, that I think it's like, it's not always the case. Or when like businesses close, right? Everybody's outside society's like, oh, it's a failure. And it's like, but like, is it? Like that's what got you here. You're right. So it's like
Yeah.
I guess we can label it as failure and that is what you're teaching people. Like I'm always like the optimist on the outside and I'm like, but that was actually really good effort. Like you did pretty great over there. Like look at all the
Yeah.
things you did. Like you
Yeah.
actually
And
got married. That's actually scary too.
yeah, no, and it's crazy that it's easier to get married than it is to get a divorce. Like literally
Wild.
just like you just sign a paper and you're married. But to get a divorce, you gotta like go through a whole process. It's insane. You gotta wait like 2 months and all this stuff. It's or 90 days, something like that. But yeah, and that's like the thing. It's like sometimes I forget when I'm talking about it because I'm so wired myself to see failed like the word failure is not a bad thing that I'll just call things failure.
Mm,
And because other people look at failure as like, oh my gosh, it's like it's that it equates like a bad thing. I'm just like, no, everything I have failed at, but I don't mean it as like it was a bad
mm,
thing. I mean it like it just didn't work out and I got data from it. You know what I mean? So like
mm.
I totally agree with what you're saying that it wasn't necessarily a failure and I wouldn't regret it. Like I'm very much like a no regrets person because like even to think like I love my ex, but like we probably shouldn't have gotten married. Like we probably should have like maybe I don't know. We didn't it's not like we didn't talk about it, but like, we only were married for 18 months and we were together for 9 years, but if we hadn't gotten married, I would have never been moved to Colorado. I would never be where I'm at now. Some of the friends I have, like I met this one girl, Tori, who is like a really close friend to me now. Never would have met her. And so, and like some of the opportunities that I've had and the things that I've done, and not that like, I'm just using my ex to like get to Colorado, but like he's
100%.
also like in a different place now. And so none of those things would have happened had we not gotten married, moved for all the places that we did. You know what I mean? So we probably wouldn't have my dog Ned. Like, so I'm definitely no regrets person. It just like didn't work out. And it's just like another one of my favorite quotes is obstacles are just detours in the right direction. So that's like really how I see failure. It's just like, okay, thanks for the reroute. Rejection is just redirection. So
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's just like a perspective shift too, like seeing all of the things that came from it and just
yeah.
like watching who you are now versus who you were when I first met you, what was probably like 5 or 6 years ago, is just like,
Yeah.
yeah, I love watching you fail. Like, bring it on.
Hell yeah, keep watching.
Like, I'm gonna be, I'm
You're
gonna be
gonna see more
watching.
of it. It's not
Yeah,
gonna stop.
I know. It's an inspiration for a lot of people though, to see someone be vulnerable and to share failure diaries, like to share that they're failing because not a lot of people do it.
Yeah.
I really wanted to chat with you today about life with ADHD. This is something that I used to think that I had. I got tested and she's like, "Girl, you got anxiety." And I was like, "Oh, cool, 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 cool." So, but there's so many people who I work with and so many people who I know, especially now, are getting newly diagnosed or starting to feel this like, well, maybe I have that too, or maybe it is. Maybe you're like me and it's just really bad anxiety,
Yeah.
whatever. Do you have any advice for the women who are listening who maybe have recently gone on this path on how they can start a business or even organize their life? Or like, what would you say to that person in the beginning stages of being diagnosed?
Yeah. So I definitely get a lot of DMs from people who get that first diagnosis, or especially people who are like get a late diagnosis and they're like over the age of like 40 and 50 and they're like, what? But I feel like it really helps people feel seen because once you get diagnosed, it's like when I got diagnosed with OCD and then I looked back at my whole life and I was like, oh, I've had this my whole life. And then I realized the way I was as a kid was not how everybody thought. I was like, oh, when you were a kid and you like bumped your elbow walking out of a door, you didn't have to turn around and bump your other elbow in the exact same way, or else you thought like someone was going to die. I'm like, not everybody felt that way.
Huh.
And my friends, I would tell my friends, they were like, no. And I was like, oh, okay. So I've had OCD my whole life. So I think when you get the diagnosis, is like one, just like recognizing that Like look back at your past and see if you can connect some dots, because it can just make you feel a little less crazy or like misunderstood, right? When you can do that. And I have a podcast episode that I recommend everyone listen to. I can even send it to you if you want to put it in the
Please
show
do.
notes.
Yeah.
It's like exactly about this topic. And it's about like my biggest piece of advice, and this is what the whole episode is about becoming a student of your ADHD. A lot of times people will either, because there might be people listening that feel this way, where they are afraid to get a diagnosis because they feel a lot of times that if they get the diagnosis, they are going to use it as a crutch. Or it's like, I don't want to like have that because then I'm just going to like lean on, oh, it's just my ADHD. And I'm like, that doesn't have to be the case, because, and this is where I call them out on it a little bit. If you do that, then you're looking at ADHD as all a bad thing. And ADHD is a superpower. We definitely have some things that we struggle with, like focus and memory and procrastination and things like that. But if you can become a student of your ADHD and become friends with it essentially, and you know how to like hyperfixate in a positive way and be in more control of it as best you can, you're going to be able to be more productive and get things done better than the average person any day. I'll put money on a person with ADHD any day when it comes to someone who's like got more of a handle on it. And so it's kind of like if you thought you had diabetes and you were like, oh, I don't want to get a diagnosis because I don't want to use it as a crutch. Like, no, you got to learn about how do I handle diabetes? What foods do I need to eat? What do I need to do? Same thing with ADHD, because ADHD is not just like, oh, I have ADHD and then that's it. It's like that you want to make sure, because we typically everybody loves dopamine, obviously, but people with ADHD, we crave it even more. We chase it even more. And so we tend to have an addiction to sugar and an addiction to things in general, and we can be impulsive. And so knowing that like you want to cut back on your sugar, not have any, but like you don't want to be like constantly eating sugar all the time, because then you're going to mess with your dopamine levels. It's going to make it harder for you to focus. If you're not moving your body correctly, if you're not taking the right supplements, if you're not getting the right sleep. So all the things that like anybody needs to do, but there's just some things that you can pay attention to that are going to help your ADHD, because it's not just being like, oh, I procrastinate and I can't focus. Like there's so many other things. And one of my favorite books, I highly recommend this to everyone with ADHD, is ADHD 2.0. Even if you're somebody who's listening and you don't have ADHD, but someone you love has ADHD, I highly recommend listening to it, because I've had ADHD for a while. I've read about ADHD, but that book like opened some parts and I was like, I didn't even know that was like a thing. And so I think that my biggest piece of advice is just understanding yourself and knowing that ADHD is not just like this blanket statement of I can't pay attention or I'm hyperactive. Like even in the book, he talks about how attention deficit disorder, it shouldn't be what it's called, because people with ADHD do not have an attention deficit. We actually have too much attention, but we don't know how to control it. We have a Ferrari brain with bicycle brakes. And so when you're able to control that Ferrari and have a better understanding of it, you're going to be able to use it as a superpower instead of something that like gets in the way. Your brain is not broken. It's just different. And your life is definitely going to be a little bit more difficult than the average person. But you either have two choices. You have a choice to figure it out, become a student of that ADHD, learn how to show up in business. And this is like what I do in my coaching, especially with my entrepreneurs, is I teach people how to run their business based off how their brain works. There's a lot of neurotypical advice out there, which is fine. People who are neurotypical don't have to like, I'm not one of those people that's like, you need to understand how to work with neurodivergent people. That's fine. That's what people like me are there for. But like, there's a lot of neurotypical advice out there that's like, you need to plan out your content for the next 3 months and have it color coded and this and that. Absolutely not. Someone with ADHD hates too much structure. That makes me feel so caged in. And so if you work with a coach that tells you to do that and you're wondering why you can't focus or why it's not working, it's not that you're broken, it's that the system that you have isn't working. And so if you can figure out how to set up your day, your habit, your structure, how you do business, how you communicate with your partner, it's just going to help you function day to day on a much better basis, because you're going to be working in unison with your ADHD versus like against it. And there's like so much friction, you know what I mean? So
Yes. I am not a fan of those stupid checklists. It's like check the boxes, do the things, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, this is not it. And I love that you're teaching people how to do business based on what they need, based on what their brain does. And then we just need more of it. Like, I think about that a lot. More space, more love, more opportunity for us to be different and unconventional in a really cool way. So I love all that. And even as you're talking about it, I'm like, maybe I do need to take that test again.
Yeah,
But
well, so there is something I actually meant to mention with ADHD, and I believe I don't know if it was in that book or in a different book, but there's something, and this has only come up in recent years due to technology and our phones and social media. There's something called VAST, which is variable attention stimulus trait, which essentially it was I don't know, invented, created, I don't know what word you would use, but it has come about due to the constant like barrage of information and our phones and social media. And so it's basically created symptoms in people in their brain and in their nervous system that act like ADHD, even though they don't
Mhm.
actually have it. So it's people who have a lot of the commonalities and symptoms essentially of people with ADHD, but not enough for a diagnosis. So there are people that are walking around like, yeah, you don't have ADHD, but because your phone and because social media,
Mhm.
because all of the things, you're kind of just having the same symptoms because of all of that, if that makes sense. So that can still
Does.
be a fact for a lot of people, because there's other things that like when it comes down to it, where you could tell the difference. Like I can always tell when I'm working with a new client when they say, "Oh, I'm not sure if I have ADHD," and they start telling me things that like when you don't know the deeper parts of ADHD, like you can be like, oh, I struggle with focus and whatnot. But like one of the things that like people with VAST and people with ADHD aren't going to have in common, most likely, is that people with ADHD have time blindness. So if you have a regular person in the room and an ADHD person in the room, and someone walks in and say, "Hey, we have to leave in 30 minutes," the person with the regular person's going to hear, "Oh, we have to leave in 30 minutes." The person with ADHD is going to go, "Oh, we just don't have to leave right now." And so 5 minutes will go by, and the person with ADHD will think it's been, or 30 minutes will go by, and the person with ADHD will think it's
Mhm.
been 5 minutes. Or another thing is that people with ADHD have a very high sensitivity to rejection. And so if you give somebody with ADHD constructive criticism, they a lot of times are going to internalize it. They're going to be like, "I'm the worst person ever. I suck. I'm terrible." And somebody there's like a Venn diagram, right? So somebody could not have VAST, not have ADHD and have that or not, you know what I mean? But it just means more likely those things are going to happen in those people. But VAST is definitely, a thing now for sure with our
I
phones.
think it's helpful to hear that too, though, because I used to always hate when people would say, like, doesn't everyone have ADHD nowadays?
I
And
know.
it's just like, okay, F off. Like, especially when I was working through the diagnosis process, I was like, that is shut up. Like, dumb. Don't
Yeah.
say that to people. And I think that hearing that there is something out there that is mimicking these symptoms for people is helpful because it's like, actually, I do have this information for you. And I can see where you're coming from because we do live in a fast-paced society and our brains are always scattered. But like there is something here. And
Yeah,
I
and the
just
thing about yeah, so one thing I want to say about that I think is really important is and again, this is talked about in the book when people are like that, because people do also do that with OCD, and like that
mm-hmm.
that drives me even more crazy than ADHD, because for me, OCD is much more debilitating than ADHD, but maybe just I mean, I've lived with both my whole life, but I've only like got diagnosed with OCD like 4 or 5 years ago. And so but with like the ADHD thing, or doesn't everybody have it? If you look at brain scans of people with ADHD and people with traumatic brain injuries, stroke, car accident, like major concussions, the brains of like a stroke patient will look similar to somebody with the brain of ADHD. So no, not everybody has ADHD in the sense of like has similar brains. There are
Mm-hmm.
certain parts where like if you're looking at like a house at night from the outside and there's like lights on, like there's if you look at like looking at that as like a metaphor in somebody's brain with ADHD, there are certain parts of the brain that just like the light switch is not turned on. And so no, not everybody has those light switches turned off. It's like, so that VAS might be a similar thing, but yeah, ADHD is not something everyone has for sure. A lot of people do have it, but not everyone.
Yeah. And I think it's just like I just want to slap people when people say things like that. You're just
Right.
like, get out
Yeah.
of here. Get a
No.
life. Get a life. I love hearing all of the information too about ADHD and just seeing it from your perspective and how you're helping people with it. Because again, we do need more conversations like this that just bring some of these things to the surface for people. Another thing I really wanted to chat with you about today was just like normalizing changing our minds. You have
Yeah.
changed your mind a lot.
Yeah. It's like my
You
favorite thing
know,
to do. I have a whole podcast episode on that too, because
right?
I'm like the queen of changing my mind.
Yeah, it's just like what like even if it's like like changing styles, changing careers, changing our opinions on things. Like society wants to put us in this box of there's one way to do it. And
Yeah.
once you said you were going to do it, back in the day when you said you wanted to be an actress, like that's it. you're an actress, period. That's it. And like, imagine you had only stayed there. Like, imagine you'd only stayed in that box. Like, what advice do you give to someone who feels stuck in the decisions that they've made in their life?
Yeah. This is like, if you look at all the things that we're talking about, fear of failure, we talked about like divorce, things like that, all of these things are the reason we don't do them or we're afraid to do them or whatever are all most of the time rooted in how other people see us. And so for me, and this is what I do in my work, is instead of just like working on the fear of failure, working on the ability to change your mind, yes, we'll work on that. Let's work on your need for outside validation. Let's work on why you care so much about what other people think. And we as human beings are wired to be that way. Like we're going to do that. And so it's impossible to like get to the point where you say like I don't care about what anybody thinks. Like, you would definitely get really close to that, and I would say like I really don't give a shit, but there are of course times where I do, but I have the tools and I have the mindset shifts and the things I need in order to like snap out of that very quickly. So like my innate reaction might be that like yeah, I care a little bit, but then I can like work through that. So I think that's like the biggest thing, because if you think about it, like the fear of changing your mind most of the time is going to be rooted in like, what are my parents going to think? What are people going to think? Like a lot of people won't leave an unhappy relationship because they're like I literally got married and then got a divorce 18 months later. Do you know how much I thought about like how silly? And I have a social media presence, and I talked about my wedding, and my pictures and videos looked really great and everybody saw them and it was wonderful. And then I had to be like, by the way, I'm getting a divorce. And you know what I mean? And so I had to know that like it's not even like trying to convince yourself that people won't think certain things. Like you can do that because most of the time the things we think people are going to think is like so silly and it never really happens anyway. But like I think it's better in my opinion to more so look at it from like a place of like worst case scenario. This is another thing I do with my clients. It's like, okay, let's say I get a divorce and I'm going to change my mind. Let's say I do network marketing and I'm going to announce I changed my mind. Worst case scenario, people are like, comment on my picture. Oh my God, you're getting a divorce and you were only married for 18 months, or you're leaving your team, you're doing that. Like, okay, what happens then? I feel not so great. And then I work through that, or then I feel like a failure. Okay, then what happens there? And I just like get to the bottom of what I'm really afraid of. And then I'm like, okay, I'll handle that. And so I think it's like worst case scenarioing yourself to be like, okay, yeah, this is scary, but like, I think the biggest thing for me that I reminded myself of when I decided to leave network marketing, when I changed my mind, my business, when I went from like life coaching to business coaching, and now I'm still business coaching, but I'm kind of shifting a little bit back to life coaching. And so I've changed my Instagram handle a bunch of times. I started a YouTube channel, stopped it, and then started it again. And all those times, like I just thought, if I like, let's say I stay, am I going to wake up 50 years from now and be like, so I stayed for what reason? So people wouldn't think a certain way about me. So then I lived the rest of my life over a possible judgment that may have not even happened, because everybody's so concerned about their own lives. Even if they do judge you, they're judging you for like 5 minutes, and then they're going back to thinking about the 4 billion things they need to think about in their life, their health, their parents, their job, you know what I mean? And so I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to changing your mind, is like reminding yourself that it's really rooted in you caring about what people think, and to what's going to matter most. Do you want to stay in a marriage just so people don't go, oh my God, you were only married for 18 months. Okay, cool. Then I stay miserable? Or do I leave, deal with like whatever could happen in the meantime, and then and most of the time the things we're afraid of never happen, and it's always like the complete opposite. So because I've already worked on this a lot, for me, like I did think about like what people were going to think, but that didn't really plague me too long because I've just been doing this work for a while. But like even if I did, the total opposite has happened after that. Like the amount of people that have come to me that have told me they've left a relationship because they saw me leave. Like people tell me they left abusive relationships because they saw me leave, and my relationship was far from abusive, not even remotely close. And so many good things have come from it, that like most of the time, not only are the fears we have not going to happen, but better things than we could ever even imagine are going to happen. And I think that's always worth it. It's always worth the risk at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, and doing it publicly, although super scary, you're gifting the universe with a lot of really beautiful things. Like we need someone to be as out there and as public with things as you are. Like not afraid to share
I
it.
will
Like
always
what a
be that
gift. I
way.
know, I love it so much. What's the best thing you've learned on this journey of self-discovery?
Uh, I really think, and this is, I feel like I would answer this so many different ways depending on like what time in my life you would ask me, or even like week to week. But what's coming up for me now, because I'm realizing this just with like some things that, are going on in my personal life that I shared with you before we got on the podcast, is like being present, being someone who has anxiety. And like for me, my OCD, for people who aren't familiar, because I've been wanting to talk more about OCD recently, because when I talk about it, people are like, can you talk about it more? Because I don't really talk about it too much, not for any other reason other than like I'm still figuring it out myself. And so my OCD can come up in so many different ways. So mine is not cleanliness. A lot of people assume that that's the case. And yes, like I can be that way. Like sometimes if my hands feel really dirty and I cannot wash them, I feel like I want to peel the skin off my face. But like 5 second rule, if I drop food on the floor, I'm gonna eat it. Like I'm not super crazy with like the cleaning stuff. Even though my apartment is really clean all the time, but like not to an extent where it's like debilitating. My OCD can be debilitating. Mine comes up in rumination. So there's like rumination OCD where I will overthink. Like everybody overthinks, but like I will overthink to the point where like I will think a thought like one sentence on repeat all day long, just playing on a loop in my head. And I can't stop thinking about it. And I'll like be like, okay, it's fine. We don't have to worry about it. And then it'll just start up again. It's like you rewind the VCR tape and then start it again. And so the reason I share that is because with like OCD and overthinking, and I'm like a professional overthinker, and like anxiety and whatnot, when you do that, anxiety is always thinking, most of the time, thinking about the future. It can be a little bit about like anxiety about like something that you said, but most of the time anxiety is like what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And when you do that, you're not living in the present. And I feel like a lot of the work I've done recently, especially after I got a divorce and then got into like a 3 month situationship that absolutely wrecked me. And from what I've seen on social media, everybody says that like there's always this post long-term relationship situationship that everybody gets into that hurts them more than the long-term relationship did, which was like a real thing. It like broke me completely. And so with all of that, I had to do this like 5 months like boy sober thing where like I didn't date, I didn't talk to anybody, I didn't do anything, and I was just like on my own. And in that, this recent self-discovery has like really reminded me how much more fun life is when you're living in the present. And it's so hard to do. So hard to do. I will not say it's easy, but like going through some things I'm going through now that are positive. I'm like, it's so much more fun to just be in the moment and go with the flow and surrender and be present as much as you can. And I have to do work to get there, but like, because with my overthinking, like certain things can happen, and I try to think to the like what I do is it's a compulsion, because people with OCD, you do your compulsions to give you like a feeling of peace. If you like, you tap or you count, that'll give you peace. For me is like if I overthink on the situation, then I'll have peace. But that's never going to happen, because let's say somebody says something and I'm trying to guess what they meant by it. I could do that all day long. It doesn't matter what conclusion I come to. It's still not what's accurate until I hear from the person. So I've realized that like I want to be as present in the moment as I can and not try to like think for safety, because then I get to actually enjoy this like life that I'm living. So there's so many things I could answer with that, but I would say that for me is like how I feel now. I
Oh,
know it's like a
that's
little bit out of left field, but
no, that's a good one too, because I think so many of us do struggle with being like here. And I was just thinking, even as you were talking, like there's not many times in the day where I'm not doing a bunch of things at the same time, even if it's my phone is in my hand or this. Like, but being here on a podcast, like I am here with you. Like there's
yeah.
nothing else literally happening, but like you and I getting to be here. It's the same thing if you go to the movie theater, like you get to do one thing. You're not on your phone, like you're actually watching the movie. And like being present is a hard thing for a lot of people, where there's like just not that many moments throughout the day where we're actually here in the moment. And
Yeah.
so the fact that that's your like top thing for your self-discovery, I think is huge.
Yeah, and it feels like how good is it just to feel for us to just like have this conversation? We're not thinking about anything,
Oh, it's
what
so
we're
good.
doing, what we're so like this feeling is a feeling everybody can have and everybody gets to experience it every day. Like think about when you haven't seen a friend for a while and you go out for coffee or you go out to dinner, you're completely like the outside, it makes me almost want to cry because I think about how peaceful that feeling is. Like when you're like, just think about being out with girlfriends at dinner, you are not thinking about anything. Like unless maybe you have something like really painful going on in your life and that's like troubling you. But for the most part, like when you're just vibing with your friends at dinner, that's why 2, 3 hours can go by and you're like, how did that happen? And I think that's like what I really want to continue to figure out how to get that feeling all the time. And I feel like I have been figuring that out more. And it's so important to me being an overthinker because like my overthinking is quite debilitating. If I'm honest. Yeah. So like, yeah, that feeling I think like that we just have of being here is like so rad. And I think like being able to have that more often is the
Mhm.
goal for sure.
100%. Yes. My
Yeah.
goal, like one of the things that I really wanted to achieve more this year was peace. And
Mhm.
like presence comes with peace. Like I feel like they do go hand in hand. Of course, we can be in really difficult situations, but like I feel like presence, being in present can come with a lot of peace. So I really, really love that that's where you're at right now and the
Yeah.
journey that you're on.
Yeah.
Can you tell our listeners where they can connect with you online, where they can find your podcast, your YouTube channel, your TikTok, all the things so that they can get a little bit more of Alexis in their life?
Yeah, so I am definitely on Instagram the most. I'm being more on TikTok now. I kind of like fell off for a bit, changed my mind, you know. But so I am the Tough Love Coach on Instagram. I have a TikTok. I have two TikToks. The Tough Love Coach. It's kind of like a personal TikTok. It's just like fun, random rants. Sometimes I share things, sometimes I don't. So like if you want to see that side of me, you can. But my main TikTok that I'm using right now is called The Failure Diaries, just exactly how spelled how it sounds. You can find me there. My YouTube is The Failure Diaries 44 because The Failure Diaries was already taken. So you can find me on there. And then I have a podcast, which is XOXO, The Tough Love Coach. Podcast. Jess was on there a few episodes ago, so you can check that out. Yeah, that's just me. I actually did I'm in the process just what is today? I don't even know what today is, Wednesday. 2 days ago, I just launched my new course. It's called From Imposter to Empowered, and it's a 6-week live course to help people who are struggling with imposter syndrome to understand it, get tools to navigate it. Because I've been asking people, I was doing like market research calls. And I was asking people a specific question and I said, what have you done to work through your imposter syndrome? Not like to improve your self-worth or this or that, but like just I'm going to work on imposter syndrome. People were like, I don't think I've ever just specifically worked on imposter syndrome. I've kind of just worked on the things around it. So I wanted to create this course to do that. So the first 3 weeks, and it's like a course where there's dripped out videos, but then we do live calls to like help with accountability and things like that. So we're working through imposter syndrome, but then the other side of the course is helping you embrace your authentic self. So if you see me on social media, I'm loud, weird, raw, just vulnerable me. And whether you have a business or you're just trying to like show up authentically in relationships, this is not like a business course. This is just like getting through imposter syndrome and embracing your authentic self. That is going down May 6th, but so I'll be launching that all this month. So that's what I really want people to be a part of. You can work with me one-on-one and all of those fun things, but you can find that on my page. But my From Imposter to Empowered course is something I'm really excited about. So you can check that out too.
So freaking exciting. Like so many exciting things
Yeah, I'm
happening.
doing a lot. Like my best friend was I was talking to her the other day. She was like, "Do you like know like how many things you're doing?" She was like, "I'm always like amazed at all the things you're doing." I was like, "I don't know. I'm just like a Virgo and I'm a manifestor in human design, and so like I just do shit and like sometimes I like don't like I'll give myself credit, but I don't. It doesn't seem like the magnitude that it probably seems to other people because like this is just like my how I live my life. No, I don't say that as in like
It's,
a
is
you know
this just
comb
my
my hair,
norm?
but I don't know. I like being busy and I still have like work-life balance and all of that stuff, but like I don't know. I just like love helping people. So I'm just gonna keep showing up and doing it.
And you've been doing it for a long time, which is
I
just
know, and I'm
so
gonna be
great.
doing it for forever. Like, and
I love it.
they're gonna like be pulling me, like, old lady, get out of here, get to the nursing home, get off Instagram. I'm gonna be still dancing on my story at like 95, whatever social media. Could you imagine what social
Yes.
media is gonna look like when we're like 100?
I think about it a lot actually because I'm like, is
Same.
this really work that I can do sustainably for the rest of my life? Like, can I do this? But
I
like, I
don't
think
know.
we're just gonna be a bunch of old ladies speaking on stages and like that's gonna be great.
I'm so down for it. It's gonna be
Yeah,
great.
it's gonna be
I'm so
great.
love
So
it.
I have a couple guests, questions that I ask every guest that comes on the podcast. You
Love it.
ready?
Yes.
Okay, what is your favorite compliment to receive?
Oh, by far, I love your music taste is the best. Like, don't tell me I'm
Mm.
pretty. Don't tell me anything. Like, you love my music taste. That's my favorite.
Okay, that came pretty quickly too.
It's by far my favorite.
I
Or you
love it.
think I'm funny, but like music taste is like very music is really important to me. So
Hmm. Yeah, and your shuffling skills with your music.
yeah.
Yeah, I love it. What's your favorite thing to do to boost your mood when you're feeling grumpy?
Dance music. I'll like dance on, I'll put on like I have a bunch of different playlists and I have to put my headphones in, not like music playing out loud. Headphones in. I love to like get on top of my bed and dance. I don't know what it is. It just feels like very like inner child-esque of like, I'm just gonna, have fun. And so yeah, for me, music is like the answer for everything. So like, yeah, my favorite music, headphones in, just dancing around.
I love that. Yes.
Maybe get like a matcha, which I'll probably do after this. So
Yes, I can picture you with a matcha and dancing on your bed. That
yeah,
might
I
get
love
messy, but it'll be good.
it.
And what do you have a song or quote that boosts your confidence?
So actually, I would say a quote I said earlier, but I've come up. I don't want to say I came up with this quote because it's kind of been the accumulation of things I've been doing recently, but it's been one I've been saying, and I really am trying to think about what I want to do with it. Like I don't know if I'm not trying to say I want to get it trademarked. I don't think you get a quote trademarked, but it's been something I say to myself every morning, and it's evolved because it used to be the second half of the quote, but now I've added more. And every morning when I wake up, and I've been saying this consistently, is today, I will look for and find evidence that abundance is everywhere. Success is easy, or success is simple, and everything is working out in my favor.
Hmm.
So that's like what I've been saying lately. And it's just like, and I like that I had like a TikTok video on this. I think even posted on Instagram too, that I add the everything is working out in my favor. So you notice I don't say like everything is working out perfectly or everything is wonderful. It's everything is working out in my favor. So that like reminds me of like kind of this yin and yang of like there might be things that happen in the day that are in my favor, but I might not like, but it's in my favor. And
Mhm.
that's like an important thing that I think keeps me grounded without being like too up here. It's like everything is working out in my favor. So like even if I do have a bad day, hey, it's working out in my favor. It might suck right now. I don't have to like it, but it is working out in my favor. So
Oh, yes. I love that. Thank you, Alexis, for being here, sharing
always,
your truth, sharing just like your real, authentic self with us. Like, we
always.
are just so happy to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here and be your friend. And like the fact that we're still friends, it's great. I'm just so proud of you.
Wild. What a wild journey it's been, huh?
Right?
I know.
Crazy. It's going to continue to be. Imagine where we're going to be in 10 years.
95 hanging out, speaking on stages together. We're like, ah,
Hell yeah.
I love it. Thank you
Oh,
so
yeah.
much.
Of course.
What's up, sis? I am so glad we could hang out today. If you love this episode, send it to a friend or share it on your social media and tag me so I can personally thank you for helping me sprinkle some confidence in the world. And don't forget, you are magic. Let's show the world your shine.